Hello everyone, welcome back. JavaMentor.net here. In today's video, let's learn about caching. Let's repeat few things again so we can better understand caching. First of all, when you're trying to call database from your Java application, that's basically external call because you're calling some application that's not your own Java application. So you're calling some external service. You count database as an external service. In the same fashion, when you try to invoke some external service over the network, for example, you're sending REST call to some external service over the network, that is also counted as an external call. And those external calls are slow. And they're slow for a very simple reason. If you're going over the network, you know from the experience when you're downloading something that is way slower than when you're transferring something from your hard disk to, let's say, your USB. Way slower. So network is slow. Any external call is slow. Calling to the database is slow for another simple reason. When you're storing data into the heap memory, into your Java application, that is saved on a RAM memory, which is way faster than the database, which is on hard disk. Databases, SQL databases, are on hard drive, and that is way slower. When I say way slower, it can be 100 times slower, even more slower than fetching the data from your RAM memory or from your heap memory, which is a RAM memory. Okay, now we can imagine that we are trying to fetch some data from the database. Let's say we want the data about some person, let's say about Rafael Nadal. So we fire one request for Rafael Nadal. Then another request comes into our application and we need to fetch Rafael Nadal again from the database. And then, let's say every 10th request needs to fetch data about Nadal. It makes sense then when we fetch the data from the database to save that data into our Java application in some variable, in some object, right? And then the next time when we need data about Nadal, we shouldn't go to the database, but we should go to our RAM memory, to our object in our Java application, right? And that's basically caching. So you're caching data inside your Java application and you're not trying to fetch data from the database. And that's basically what you need to know about caching for now. You can see that caching is improving speed when you're fetching data. Now, it must be that this caching thing has some downsides, right? Because if there is no downside, everyone would use caching. No one would ever again use database. They would put all the data inside the cache. There are two drawbacks of the caching. First of all, when you cache the data, you're putting that data into some variable in Java, into some object. That means that you are using RAM memory. So if you put a lot of persons inside the RAM memory, your Java application will have a lot of consumption of RAM memory. And your RAM memory is very limited. That's problem number one. Problem number two is when you are updating data inside your database, data is not automatically updated inside the cache. So you need to make sure that you have the same data inside the database and inside your cache. It can happen that you fetch Rafael Nadal from the database and then something is changed related to him and you have stale data in your cache, right? There are some strategies where you're going through the cache when updating the data and so on and so on. I will not bother you too much regarding that, but you should be aware that your cache and source of information, regardless if your source is database or some external service, you need to be aware that source of the information and your cache needs to be in sync. Okay, now when we know the drawbacks of the cache, it should be logical which data should be in the cache. First of all, we need the data that is not changed frequently, because if the data is changed frequently, we need to synchronize our cache and database, which is a costly operation. That's first thing. We need data in cache which is not changed frequently. And the second thing is we shouldn't put a lot of data inside our cache, because if we put a lot of data in the cache, we will have a lot of RAM consumption, which means that, well, if you have 5 million persons in your database, you shouldn't put all of them inside the cache. And maybe persons are updated regularly, so they are not good candidate on that basis that they are updated regularly. But we should put inside the cache some data which has small footprint. For example, categories. You can have categories saved in your database, but how many categories can you have, for example, on your e-commerce website? 20, 30, 40, 100 categories? That's fine. 100 objects in the RAM memory is nothing. You should just be careful not to put 50,000 or 100,000 objects in the cache. I mean, you can do that as well, but if you have some object which has 100 rows in the database, like categories, subcategories, maybe some information about countries, I don't know what is the acronym of the country, name of the country, a link to the flag of that country, and something like that. How many countries are in the world? Maybe 100, 200. That's fine. You can put that many objects in your cache. And that would be everything that one beginner needs to know regarding caching. In the next video, let's learn about JPA persistence context, and let's see how that context use caching. See you in the next video.